Let me tell you about Simone. She's 28 years old with a husband and two young children. After a car accident, she has severe brain damage and is in a permanent vegetative state.
The doctors inform her family that she'll never regain consciousness again. But because she's young and otherwise healthy, she could live for years with a feeding tube.
Her family is facing an impossible decision. Should they keep her on life support indefinitely? Or would Simone have wanted to be allowed to die naturally? The problem is, they're guessing because Simone never told them what she would want.
Hi everyone, welcome to Thoughtful Planning. I'm Santiago.
And I'm Honey. Today we're diving into advanced directives, specifically what you need to know before you fill out the forms.
So here's our essential question for today. What decisions do you have to make about your values and your priorities before you can meaningfully complete your advanced directives?
We'll come back to it at the end.
But first, our usual disclaimer. We're not attorneys, financial advisors, or medical professionals. Everything we share here is to be used in an educational purpose, and it's based on our own research and experience in helping families prepare.
If you have complex medical situations or want legal advice specific to your circumstances, please consult with appropriate professionals. What we're doing today is helping you think through the important questions so you're prepared when you sit down with those forms.
Yeah, and just to be clear, we're focusing the forms you need here in Texas since that's where we live. But the thinking process into completing these forms really applies anywhere you live.
If you're in another state, you can search for your state's specific forms online, but the values in the work we're doing today are fairly universal.
So let's start with something important. When we say advanced directives, we're actually talking about a collection of forms, not just one form.
Right. When you search for Texas Advanced Directives, several documents come up. There's the Directive to Physicians and Families or Surrogates, also known as Living Will. There's also the Medical Power of Attorney, the Declaration of Mental Health Treatment, the Out of Hospital Do Not Resuscitate Order, and the Statutory Durable Power of Attorney.
Wow, that's a lot.
A lot.
With all that said, you'll also need a Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996, or HIPAA authorization. And we're going to talk about that in a separate process entirely.
So today, though, we're going to focus on the living will, the directive to physicians and family or surrogates. But again, we're going to refer to that as the living will for short. That's the form where you document what kind of medical treatment you do or don't want in specific situations, especially when you cannot speak for yourself.
Yeah, and now for a really quick note to our listeners in other states. When you search for your state's forms, make sure you're on a .gov website. That ensures you're getting legal, valid forms.
And your state might not offer all the same forms that Texas does. Some states name and combine documents differently or have fewer options available. But every state has some version of a living will.
So here's what most people don't realize about this form. It's actually pretty straightforward. Again, in Texas, you can find it free on the Texas Department of State Health Services website, and it's fillable online, or you can print it and complete it by hand.
And quick tip, if you're printing it to fill out by hand, I suggest printing 2 copies and to use a blue pen. That shows it's an original signature, not a photocopy.
But here's a problem some people run into. When they download the form, they start filling it out. And then they hit a question like, if you have a terminal condition, do you want life-sustaining treatment discontinued?
And they might freeze because they've never asked themselves, what is life-sustaining treatment? How do I feel about that? What would I want?
So the form sits there half filled out for weeks, months, or even years. Meanwhile, you have no protections in place.
That's what we're preventing today. We want you to do the thinking first. So when you sit down with that form, which we'll do in upcoming episodes, you can complete it confidently.
So here's where the real prep work comes in. Before you can fill out any form meaningfully, you really need to deeply understand what you want in those various situations that you may face.
And to help with that, we're going to point you to an incredible resource. It's called the Critical Conditions Planning Guide by the Emory Center for Ethics. That story about Simone we opened with, that's actually from the guide.
We're going to put a link in our show notes for this, but you can also search online for Emory Critical Conditions Planning Guide, and that's where you'll find it.
So this document is going to walk you through different scenarios and questions that will really help you clarify your values and wishes.
It's not a legal form. It's more prep work. Think of it like this. The legal form is where you record your decisions, but the Emory Guide is where you actually make those decisions.
It asks you to define the quality of life with yes, no, or undecided responses.
So it also helps you think about specific treatments, like do you want antibiotics if you're in the final stages of an illness? Do you want dialysis if your kidneys should fail?
And it asks you to make decisions about your care.
Yeah. So this is the values work that we're really talking about. It's so much easier to do when you have a guide to help you walk through and maybe define some of those terms you truly don't understand.
And the beauty of this document is that it helps you think through scenarios you might not have considered. I mean, it gets you ready for the questions that will be on that legal form.
Yeah, I love scenarios when we walk through stuff. Now, let's talk about some specific scenarios the Texas Living will ask you to consider because the Emory Guide will help you walk through and think about these things thoroughly.
So there are two main situations on the form. Understanding them now means you'll be ready when you see them.
So first, a terminal condition. It's an illness or injury where even though there's treatment, the doctors expect you to die within 6 months.
So think about cancer that's spread and isn't responding to treatment, and or end-stage heart failure or advanced lung disease.
Treatments might give you weeks, months, but there's no cure. The doctors can't cure you. The questions become, do you want those treatments?
Yeah, and some people say yes, give me every extra day, even if it means being in the hospital, even if I'm uncomfortable. And others might say, don't prolong dying. I mean, keep me comfortable, but no procedures that won't cure me.
Exactly. So the second scenario is an irreversible condition. This differs a little bit from, or a lot of bit, from being terminal.
This means a condition that can be treated but never cured. In some situations, you can't care for yourself, you can't make decisions, and without life sustaining treatment, you would die.
So what we're thinking about here is like things like advanced dementia, where you don't recognize anyone, you can't communicate, and in some cases you can't even feed yourself, or you're in a permanent vegetative state after a brain injury.
You could be kept alive for years with feeding tubes and other treatments, but you won't recover your ability to think, communicate, or care for yourself.
So the question is, in that situation, would you want the treatments that keep you alive, or would you want to be allowed to die a natural death?
And this is where working through the Emory Guide really helps. It asks you to think about what's important to you, being able to recognize loved ones, communicate, or care for yourself.
Yeah, when you're going through these value questions, deciding about an irreversible condition really becomes clear.
So let's talk about some specific treatments because understanding what they are helps you work through the Emory Guide and prepare for the legal form.
Yeah, this is something that I had to go through, but artificial nutrition and hydration. So that's a feeding tube, whether it's through your nose or surgically placed in your stomach. Um, It provides food and water when you can't eat or drink on your own.
Now, some people feel strongly that food and water should always be provided, even artificially. But others feel that if they can't eat on their own and recovery is not possible, they don't want a feeding tube.
Yeah. It's important to know when you're at the very end of life, when someone is actively dying, the body naturally stops wanting food and water.
Right. And that's okay. I mean, that's just part of the process. But earlier in an illness, a feeding tube might keep someone alive for months or years. So think about it. In what circumstances would I want this? And when would I not want this?
So, speaking from experience, uh, before I was treated for cancer, they said, "Hey, do you want a feeding tube installed? It's easier to do it before you start going through treatment." So I said, "Yeah, why not? Well, just in case."
Mhm.
Um, and then the radiation really affected my throat, where I couldn't swallow anything. And without that feeding tube, I probably wouldn't have survived. It saved my life.
Mhm.
So the next level thing would be a ventilator breathing machine. If you can't breathe on your own, a machine that really pumps air into you and allows you to breathe.
Sometimes this is temporary. You could be recovering from surgery or pneumonia. You just need help for a few days.
But sometimes it's permanent. Um, if recovery isn't possible and you need to be on the breathing tube indefinitely, is that something you really want?
Then there's CPR or cardiopulmonary resuscitation. If your heart stops, would you want attempts to restart it with chest compressions, electric shocks, breathing tubes? Survivors might have broken ribs, brain damage from lack of oxygen, or other complications.
So some decide that if they're seriously ill or elderly, they don't want CPR attempted. Others want it regardless of what happens.
And the Emory Guide helps you think through all of these situations: dialysis, antibiotics, surgery, blood transfusions, so you're prepared to make those decisions.
Now, let's talk about the core values that you might need to wrestle with. The Emory Guide will walk you through these, and let's share a preview with everybody.
All right, so first, what makes your life worth living?
Now, really think about this. Is being able to recognize your loved ones something that's important to you? Being able to communicate, walk independently, be mentally sharp?
And for some people, they might say, as long as my heart is beating, I want to be here. But for others, they might say, if I can't recognize my grandchildren or have a conversation, that's really not quality of life for me.
Now, for these questions, there is no right or wrong answer, but you need to know what your right answer is for your situation.
And next, how important is independence to you?
If you reach a point where you need round the clock care, you can't breathe on your own, you can't feed yourself, you can't make decisions. How do you think you feel about that right now before that hits you?
And some people would be okay with that, still wanting to be here with family. And others would feel that losing independence means they wouldn't want aggressive interventions.
That's right. So here's another critical one. What role does your spirituality or religious beliefs play?
Some believe life should be preserved at all costs, and others believe that when death is inevitable, we should allow natural death without prolonging the process artificially.
So your beliefs matter. The Emory Guide has space for you to think about how your faith, your spirituality affects your decisions.
And here's one that's really important. What are your fears and worries about end of life care?
Being in pain, being a burden on your family. Are you worried about those costs of care and how much that's going to feed into whatever you plan to leave for your family? Being stuck where someone might not be able to visit you.
The guide asks you to identify these fears because they're part of what shapes your decisions.
So When you know what you're most worried about, what you most fear, you can make those decisions and choices now that address those concerns.
Now, let me share something we learned from estate planning attorneys about filling out these forms.
When you get the actual form in later upcoming episodes, be succinct in how you spell out your wishes.
And here's why. In an emergency, the doctor won't be able to read a book. They're focused on saving your life, and time is of the essence.
So you need your wishes to be clear. A quick read is best. That's why these forms have check boxes.
Now, the Texas form does have one section where you can add additional notes. Things like organ donation preferences, brain donation, and you can attach addendums if you want to provide more detail.
But the key here is clear, concise, easy, and quick to read. That's what will be most helpful in an actual emergency.
The Emory Guide, though, that's where you can take all the time you need, work through it thoughtfully, think deeply, and write out your reasoning.
Yeah. So then, after you've done your thoughtful planning, when you fill out your legal form, you will be able to distill all of your thoughts into a clear, concise instruction sheet.
Now, just to be clear, we're not asking you to fill out the living will right now. All we're wanting you to do is review the Emory Guide.
Go over all the scenarios. It might not be something you're going through right now, but it might be something you face in the future. It's going to ask you questions to consider when you're choosing a healthcare agent, which is a person you would trust to speak on your behalf if you can't speak for yourself.
Right? That person is also called your advocate, and choosing them is as important as any decision on these forms.
It's we've talked about it before. It's going to be a hard decision when it comes up to it, but I know that I'm going to do what you want. So anyway, and I know she's going to do what I want. That's why we picked each other. When we're going to do the whole episode on the medical power of attorney, where you're going to walk through how to select a person, what their role is, and how to have the conversation with them when you ask them to be that advocate.
But I want to mention it now because part of your preparation work is keeping someone in mind. You don't need to approach them yet or have any conversations. So don't worry about that. We're going to help you with that in that future episode. Some people get stuck when they're told, just go talk to them because they don't know how to have the conversation or how to approach the person. And so we don't want you to get stuck. And that's why, again, just think of that person, write them down. What I like about that Emory document is it's going to ask you some questions and it's going to actually help you figure out who is that person that actually has maybe similar values as you.
So for now, just think about who in your life really understands you, who knows what you want, and then who would honor your wishes even in a crisis, even if it hurts them. Who can you trust with this important responsibility? We're not saying reach out to them yet. Keep them in mind as you're going through the Emory Guide. And in our Medical Power of Attorney episode, it's going to be complete with resources to hopefully make this conversation easier.
All right, so here's what we want you to do before our next episode. First, download and work through the Emory Critical Conditions Planning Guide. We'll put the link in our show notes.
Now, take the time to do this. Don't rush through it. Just make sure you take every scenario seriously. And you don't have to complete this thing in one sitting. This is really deep, deep personal thinking.
Right, so set aside some quiet time. Maybe journal about the questions. Talk with your spouse if you feel comfortable, or you can even email us with your questions, and we'd be happy to try to help you walk through your situation. And you can reach us at info@legacytoolkit.com.
You know, you said take some time, like quiet time, maybe pray on it, meditate on some of the questions, if that's part of your process. Um, The point is to really take the time to think about your answers. It's okay if you don't have an answer right now. Read the question, think about it, come back to the question, and then write your answers down. And that's really not a permanent answer because as you grow, you might change your mind later.
Second, start thinking about who you might want to be your healthcare agent or advocate. You don't need to approach them yet. Just keep someone in mind and actually maybe keep two people as another person for a backup.
Yeah, that primary and a backup. Before we close, I want to say something about why this preparation work matters so much.
And what's that?
What is it? Well, a lot of people might want to skip this part and just jump into the form, check some boxes and be done with it. That's really not putting down and thinking about the scenarios. It's really not getting to what you really, really want.
Right. And I get that. It's very uncomfortable to think about these scenarios, and it's just a lot easier to quick check a box.
It is. But here's the thing. If you skip all the values work, if you skip all the scenarios, if you skip a couple of pages, you might not get to where you really want to be.
Right. Because you haven't really thought through what matters to you and what quality of life means to you, what you would and wouldn't want. And those are all very important. And then we get it. It's uncomfortable, but it's, again, important.
Yeah, and being that we're in our third year now, wow, that seems like a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Over our journey going through this stuff, we've changed our position on some things.
Mm-hmm.
Both of us have. I might not agree with what she wants, from my perspective, but that's what she wants, and that's what I'm going to do for her. So, and she's going to do the same. So if you want that, take your time and work through something like the Emory Guide. Something that isn't a form, it's preparation work. Your making decisions can reflect you, your values, and maybe make it easier to have that conversation later.
Right. And, it's not just the Emory Guide actually that can help. Um, there's sometimes you hear in the news or you read an article about a celebrity that has passed or has had a terrible accident and they're now incapacitated. And so helping them or observing their situation could be helpful to you because you could put yourself in their shoes and think, well, what would I do? Would I do the same thing or what would I want? And so forth. So the Emory Guide is definitely helpful, but also just everyday real life can be helpful too.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of the most important documents you're going to ever complete. It deserves thoughtful preparation. When you download the guide, you'll see 44 pages, but the first 26 are really the most important things that you need to focus on.
All right, so let's circle back to our central question. What decisions do you need to make about your values and priorities before you can meaningfully complete an advance directive?
I think we've helped show what you need to understand and what really makes your life worth living, what your beliefs are about medical intervention, what your priorities are going to be um, when you face that decision between quantity and quality of life.
Right, and it's best to think of these situations while you're clear of mind and not in those emergent situations. And because actually you'll be incapacitated, you might not be able to talk.
Exactly. So you need to consider specific treatments and whether or not you want them. And when you start thinking about those things, who can you really speak to that you trust?
But most importantly, you need to do the deep values work first. That's why we're pointing you to the Emory Guide.
Exactly. Because without that foundation set, you're just filling out a form. They're just words on a paper. But when the preparation work is done, the forms become meaningful and it really express your wishes.
And that's what makes a difference.
In our next episode, we're going to talk about the addendums you might want to consider for your living will. These are optional additions that some find very helpful, but they're not required.
We'll help you understand what addendums are available and how to decide if any of them make sense for you.
Exactly. So, if you found this episode helpful, please share it, hit the subscribe button below if you're on YouTube, and give us a follow uh, on your favorite podcast platform.
Until next time, remember every chapter you write today shapes your legacy tomorrow. Thank you for joining us at Thoughtful Planning.